forward for a better life for humanity. And at the same time, slowly we're realizing that there's a gap, there's a vacuum of spirituality, value ethics, that we are dire in need, not just in the Islamic world, but all over the world. And hence, trying to find that balance becomes very important and pertinent just to move forward. And more so for the Muslim population of the world, which is 1.7 billion, and the majority of them are under the age of 30. So these are young people. And because of the high level of education, high level of connectivity and internet and technology, it becomes pertinent to try to understand what happens. And I think we owe it to them, those who are older, who have come before, to share our experiences, our knowledge, to help guide them, but also to be guided by them. I have so much hope, and I put so much emphasis and trust in the next generation to figure out. And that's why I see this as a beginning of I want to say it gently, a revolution in a good way of thought, of philosophy, of combining religion and science in a beautiful way that maintains both and takes us forward to a better world for the future generations. I will stop there, and I'm very excited to hear the comments from the students, the authors, and everyone else.
Maybe one follow-up question. You're very much involved in education, I think, also. How does this relate to interest in the educational issues?
Absolutely, it's right in the center, right? Because if we're going to understand how to navigate science and religion, it's all about how we learn it and how we share it with others, which is pedagogy, however way you look at it. And being a teacher at the university, previously a teacher in a school, working with the public community about education, it is very important to train our students to be critical thinkers. And in order to be critical thinkers, you need to stem from a springboard of a very good basic understanding of a framework of how to put religion and science together to move forward. And I think this is the crux of the challenge. I don't like to say problem, of the challenge. How do we draw upon our rich history of science as Muslims from our Islamic civilization, but at the same time, being bold to create a whole new world and vision that is not drawn back, but actually moves forward. And understanding that science is anybody can do science. Any human being can do science. It's just how do you use the benefits and reap the benefits of science and apply it in an ethical framework. This ethical framework could be Islam, it could be Christianity, it could be anything, universal values. And I think it's renegotiating that framework. And I dare to say that this requires systems change, paradigm shifts. But it's risky, it's scary, but it's going to come with the most wonderful fruits in the future.
Thank you very much. May I invite Professor Guessoum to speak on the nature of the series? What motivated you to start this initiative?
Thank you, Professor Drees. I want to start by thanking, first of all of you participating from different corners of the world, but particularly our two libraries for organizing this joint event. And forgive me if I'm a bit biased, but a really big shout out for our AUS library for an incredible job in organizing this, including the different activities surrounding it, the book signing, the book exhibition that's in the library right now on Islam and science, the reception, and so on. So thanks so much. It's really heartwarming to see these kinds of activities at my university. Now, I also want to give a bit of a shout out to Mr. Alex Wright, who is the managing editor of all the Cambridge University Press Elements series, and there are now dozens of them, who actually contacted us about 3-4 years ago. He had been the managing editor of my original book 10 years ago now, or a little bit more, Islam's Quantum Question, Reconciling Muslim Tradition and Modern Science. And he wrote me an email saying, I don't know if you are aware, but we have had now for the last few years these series of booklets called Elements. And I think Islam and science is a rich field that can have a series of its own. And I think you could do a good job in organizing that. And so my first reaction was, well, how many booklets are you talking about? And he said, I think the minimum that we usually envision is about 30. And I said, 30? Are you crazy? Where am I going to find 30 titles and 30 authors? I don't have that in mind. And then I contacted Stefano and I said, Stefano, help. this is a great idea, but I don't think I can do this. And so with Stefano, we labored for months to try to put together a rationale. And the more we thought about it, the more we thought, this is an absolutely brilliant idea. Because Islam and science in general is a very, very wide and rich field. It has to do with history. A lot of people tend to think of Islam and science in historical terms. But I think even today we can shed some light on some aspects of history that are not very well known. For example, the role of women in science in the Islamic civilization. The role of institutions, libraries in those days, madrasas, observatories, hospitals. What role did they play in developing and furthering this understanding of science in the Islamic culture? And then there is all the theological and philosophical ideas and issues going back all the way to the famous debates between Al-Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, and so on, but which have continued to today. What place, as Stephen Hawking put it in his famous Brief History of Time, what place then for a creator, right? So after he lays down all his cosmology and then he says, what place then for a creator? And that's the big question. What place then for a creator in all of science, in all our understanding and description of the universe? We tend to, nobody, as far as I know, and I've read hundreds of papers in my career, nobody, points to God at some point in the equations or in the experiments, right? So where is God in all of this? How do we understand the place of God? Is there divine action in the world? Are there miracles? What about evolution? I'm sure Professor Rana will talk a little bit later about this because that's her prime expertise. Evolution and science, evolution and religion in general, evolution and Islam in particular. And then there's all kinds of new topics that have surfaced. I mean, we can talk about this a little bit later, that have surfaced in the last 5, 10, 20 years that have to do with sometimes technology, genetic engineering, beginning of life, embryology, end of life, euthanasia, the definition of life itself, which now has changed medically speaking. And then now we have artificial intelligence, all these, metaverse avatars. Can I be in different places at the same time? What does it mean that I am in different places at the same time? I mean, there's a whole long list of topics, and I've just brushed a few of them: consciousness, free will, you name it. And so we are just beginning on this huge adventure. I don't know how we're going to handle all of this because it's a very, very wide field of topics and experts. But as Professor Rana said, this is an absolute must today to bring to the students, to bring to academics, to bring to even the general audience. And I think the very format of something like this, which is 75 pages long, but solid, rigid, well-referenced, etc., is something that everybody will need, I think.
Maybe a follow-up question. The book series is in English. Will you also reach out to, people who have other primary language, not only Arabic, but maybe also other languages significant in the wider Muslim world, Indonesia, Bahasa, or other languages?
Absolutely right. So in the CUP plan, this is not part of the project to have the translations, but CUP is fully supportive of any efforts, and we have been talking about this in the last several months, of now that we have at least one title and a few more coming in the next few months, and there's going to be, as I said, presumably in the next 5 years, a couple dozen such titles, and the need is really in the Muslim world, first and foremost, that to bring, this understanding and this knowledge to, Indonesia has more than 200 million people, Pakistan has more than 200 million people, and the Arab world is more than 300 million people. So right there you have about a quarter of the world's population, or 1/10 maybe or something. And in 3 languages, in Arabic, Bahasa Indonesia, and Urdu, not to mention other languages, we could be reaching hundreds and hundreds of millions of people. So this is something that is close to our hearts, Stefano and I, and the rest of our supportive staff, so to speak, or colleagues, to start thinking and working on translations maybe within the next year or 2.
Okay. And maybe another group that I'm interested in is also young Muslims in, say, the Western world, in non-Muslim majority countries, in Europe or United States or elsewhere. I mean, they also need to sort out how to think about science and how much is it tied to non-Muslim culture, and how can it be tied also to their own background?
Yes, and actually just last week I was talking to Stefano and I said, I think that now that we have a little bit of funds, and I'll just put that on the side, we should be thinking of some kind of live events elsewhere to really meet the public and to introduce these ideas. It's great to have hybrid, online, in person, etc., but maybe go and meet the public elsewhere, including in Europe and in North America, North Africa, and other places like that. So there's a huge amount of work that can be done, and inshallah, let's just say inshallah.
Thank you very much. Maybe I turn to Stefano. Stefano, this particular book is your joint project. What's the message of this particular installment in the series?
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Drees, Vim, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to see guests joining us by the second. It's so exciting. And of course, I join Professor Guessoum, Nidhal, in thanking our respective libraries for setting up this event. Now, to your question, Professor Drees, Vim, there are many features of this booklet that I would like to mention, but I will focus perhaps on two, since the time at our disposal is limited. What is perhaps special about this booklet, first of all, is the fact that it was co-written by two authors who come from different backgrounds. So you have the astrophysicist, the Muslim astrophysicist, Nidhal, and you have the non-Muslim trained in philosophy of science, that is me. But we have this convergence, we have this interest in common in what Nidhal, in one of his recent publications, has called fine education. So we approach the topic, we approach the field, we approach the debates on Islam and science with this keen interest in education. And I was taking notes earlier while Professor Dajani was speaking. We are both interested not only in producing scholarly work, not only in producing erudition, but in being educators and in participating in what Rana has called this revolution, which is, to be sure, a risky one. It's a scary one. I'm in agreement with you, Rana, but it's also an exciting one. So what readers will find is an opinionated introduction to this very broad and wide and deep field, written by two different scholars, but who share this interest in education, so that have this critical bent. Now, to the virtues of, and this is of course holds valid for the series in general. Now, to the virtues of the specific booklet, if I have to mention one, I would say brevity. As you said, it's a booklet. It's not a book. Now, from the perspective of the authors, having a limited number of words and pages at our disposal was quite the challenge. Nidhal knows this very well. We have been facing a lot of, dilemmas, what to drop, how to cover very important figures, and debates in a very few lines, in a very few words, in a very few paragraphs. But in fact, well, I said drop, but perhaps that was the wrong word, because I think that we succeeded over a limited number of pages, 65 if you exclude the bibliography, to provide readers with a comprehensive, opinionated but comprehensive map of the debate, including modern and contemporary ones, and an agenda for upcoming debates. So the debates, the topics, the discussions that are going to be hot over the next few years, and that we in fact intend to cover with our series. So in over a limited number of pages, the readers are going to walk away with a fairly good overview of what the discussion of Islam and science science is about, and of course through the very rich bibliography they'll be able to read more and to build their own knowledge. And this is information that otherwise readers would have found scattered all over scholarly literature, and perhaps presented in not so accessible a way as in our booklet.
Thank you very much. Maybe a follow-up question. In the booklet, you provide a kind of map, and there you have a category, the new generation. And Nidhal is an example of that. And I think also Professor Dajani is an example of that. What's new about the new generation?
In fact, the new generation is a label that I gave to scholars and scientists like Nidhal and Rana a few years ago. In fact, already a decade ago, while approaching this debate on Islam and science. Back then, I consider myself more as an historian of ideas. I had not started teaching in the Muslim world yet, but I would say that what is new about these authors is the fact that, like authors who have written previously about Islam and science, like they are interested in harmonizing Islam and science, but they also have this very solid background in science, scientists and educators. But then again, when we talk about the new generation, we are talking about this relatively new wave in the debate. But what I would like to emphasize is that the booklet is not just about what I call the new generation, but it's about like new and upcoming debates that exceed these specific figures and their respective contributions.
Thank you very much. I see that we have about 27 participants aside of the panel online. So if someone to pose questions, put them in the chat, and then we may use them later in this hour. Professor Dajani, what topics do you think are most important in Islam and science? Everything, or is there something particular? Sorry, your microphone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, to me, everything is exciting, right? Everything is exciting and piques my curiosity. But if you had to prioritize and make and focus on a few, from my observation, speaking with students, not just in Jordan and the Arab world, but across the world, and not just Muslim students, but even students from other faiths, from the Western, say, part of the world. The one that I feel is the most controversial and causes the most ethical dilemmas is evolution. Biological evolution. I know the physics world, astronomy may cause some controversial, but really, when it hits the ground, is evolution, especially human evolution. That's the hottest one, and that's why, to me, that's the reason I engage in these kinds of panels, and I want to write about this, is because we need to resolve this issue and not get stuck on it and not being able to move forward. And for the Muslim world in particular, there is such a wonderful resolution. I cannot speak about the Christian religion, but I can speak about the Muslim religion, that there is a resolution that this is all, in my opinion, a myth, that there's a controversy. If we really draw the correct framework of how religion is just an ethical framework, and that science is open and free to do whatever you want, then you are free. You are free, and actually religion calls you to use your mind, calls you to interrogate, calls you to be critical, calls you to question and to ask. And if you don't question, and if you're not critical, then you're not being a good Muslim. And those are the thoughts and ideas that I want to really push out, so that students are equipped with the critical thinking skills that will allow them not just tackle evolution, but tackle other issues around them that exist today or will come in the future. With all the advancement in science, other issues are going to come up. So we're not going to solve for each one. What we can do as educators is help our students have those skills so that they can grapple with it going forward. And that's why I talk about evolution. I tell my students, whether you agree or disagree, you're using the vaccine, you're eating the vegetables and the really nice sweet tomatoes and the watermelon without seeds. Then why are we talking about this? Because it helps you move forward in a productive way. But the second hot topic, not from a scientific kind of discipline, but actually more from a philosophical, so to speak. Again, I'm not a philosopher, but I speak from experience. And I think here the benefit is not just for the Muslim world, but the rest of the world. Today, where I'm living currently in New York City, there are people who gather, academics of the highest top tier, who claim that mathematics was started with Pythagoras and then was latent and dormant till the 17th century. When I hear these sophisticated, educated people saying that, I say, oh my, what is this ignorance? So there's ignorance, and therefore these topics are important to bring up, because we cannot move forward if we do not draw upon the histories and the knowledge and the wisdom of all diverse populations and peoples around the world, not just for the past history, but today. If I do not acknowledge what happened in the past, I will not listen to somebody from China or India or the Arab world. And this is not good science. To do good science, you need everybody on board. You need everybody's perspective, different races, ethics, ethnicity, religions. And speaking, Nidhal mentioned women. There's a gender lens, looking at things differently. That's how we can together solve the challenges of the 21st century and move forward. Hence my interest in this. So from those to me are the two hottest things, and why I'm in this full thrust, so that we can help move forward the world. And maybe I would add the last one is, there is a spiritual gap. There is a vacuum. My students come to me from MIT, from Yale, and they tell me there's a vacuum, and there's a spiritual vacuum. And I think here, if we understand how Islam grapples with science, we can present a new way of how religion and science can coexist in a beautiful way going forward. And so this is a huge place to experiment, a huge place to make discoveries, and to share them and work together in a positive way.
Thank you very much. Yes, your remark about history reminded me of key terms of mathematics, like algebra for a discipline or algorithm for a procedure, which have Arabic roots, and not accidentally. Yeah. So the first part, I think, was that it's not just about how we relate, but about the self-understanding, understanding what science is doing as a kind of exploration and what the significance of faith is. Yeah. So I think that's very helpful. This was, well, what's today, in a sense. Nidhal, do you have a crystal ball with you? Can you talk also about the future? What will come up?
I'm not sure about crystal ball, but so there are some topics that have been with us and are not going to go away, unfortunately. Professor Rana mentioned evolution, so that's one. I referred to earlier to some of the long-standing debates about God's role and action in the world. Is there regularity in laws, or is there occasionalism, as the philosophers and theologians know? Are there miracles, or are miracles just, infrequent but do not violate any laws? So there are some issues that have been around, and I think will continue. But if we mean by hot topics as topics that are going to just emerge or have started to emerge and are going to shock our conscience, then there's a whole number of them. So for example, the whole issue of consciousness and free will, I mean, I'm constantly amazed at how many important scientists and thinkers believe that we have no free will, that consciousness is some kind of like an ether, some kind of a delusion that we have given to ourselves through evolution just to make ourselves live, comfortably. And so I think these questions of what is consciousness, is it purely human? Or what I mean by consciousness, I mean self-consciousness, being aware of one's thoughts and feelings and ideas and being hopefully in control of one's thoughts and feelings and so on. Is that purely human? There's a whole bunch of ideas and issues that have to do with what does it mean to be human? What is human nature? And that begins from conception all the way to, in the end, can we transcend our bodies? Can we become sort of immortal in the sense that, look, if I upload my thoughts to the metaverse, then I can just go and die and, my avatar can continue, right? And maybe even spread out. I've read science fiction books where, some being spreads itself into 100 and live, throughout the galaxy. So is that possible? Is that just nonsense, science fiction? Or if that's possible, then, spiritually speaking, our relation to God, what does that mean? There's a whole bunch of issues that have to do with the evolution of science and technology. So, for example, I mentioned Stephen Hawking earlier with cosmology. So now we're talking about multiverse, and we're talking about no Big Bang or pre-Big Bang cosmologies. I mean, we have had a hard time even accepting heliocentrism, that the Earth is not at the center, that this universe is absolutely huge, staggeringly huge. I cannot even describe it even in zeros to my students. And now we're talking about zillions of universes. If that's true, we're not sure if there is really a metaverse, not a metaverse, a multiverse. And was there a beginning to this universe, or this universe came from other universes and it has continued cyclically maybe, or eternally, as the philosophers used to say? And then when we get to technology, I mentioned earlier genetic engineering. I mean now, and Professor Rana can talk a lot more about this than me, but now we can go into embryos, and even before embryos. I mean, we can go into sperm and ovum and decide which genes we want to keep and which genes we want to remove, and just do designer babies. And this is not science fiction. Again, this is not. In the summer, I read another science fiction book titled Upgrade, by Blake Crouch. Wonderful book. An absolutely fascinating story. Lots of action. But it just tells you, what happens if we are able to just go into human genes and do just an upgrade, and then we have some upgraded capabilities. We're not, like Hulk, super something green. No, we're just humans, but now we have bigger capabilities and we can do things that we have never been able to do as humans. And that goes on with all kinds of modifications that technology can allow us to do. And what does it mean that we are humans? Does it mean that we can modify ourselves, change completely, and still be humans with spirituality? I think there are challenges that religions in general, including Islam, will have to face in the coming decade or two. So it's fascinating, it's scary a little bit, but hey, we have to face reality.
Thank you very much. So much about the power that science delivers as well, the abilities that are right. And maybe I go to some of the questions that have been posted online. One is by Gilali, and he asks how can we reach a harmonious balance between Islam and science when some insist on sticking to dogma and beliefs, even if they show great critical skills? I'm thinking, for instance, about the advocates of academic exceptionalism. So apparently a criticism of some religious thinkers who stick too much to dogma, even though they are intellectually very able. Is that blocking harmonious engagement?
Stefano?
Well, perhaps as a philosopher, I could easily get away with this by saying that it all depends on your definition of harmony. But since we are touching upon Adamic exceptionalism in particular, I guess that perhaps the most qualified one to answer this question is Rana.
Yeah, no, thank you. And this is a question that was actually brought up by Stefano's students. Last week, I shared 2 sessions with his students, and they asked similar questions. So the way I approach this is that it's not about whether they agree or disagree with Adamic evolution, etc. That's not the point. I think these are distractions. The real problem is the real way, learning how to be critical thinkers. The person who asked the question said they are critical thinkers, yet they have a problem. I question this claim that they are critical thinkers, right? So that's number one. And it's about focusing how to train people to be critical thinkers. But number 2, that even this learning to be a critical thinker is a journey. When you're taking somebody from a way of thinking, a framework, and taking them to a totally different framework, this is not going to happen quickly. It has to be through iterations and gradual understanding and shifting, especially that the framework that we're trying to draw them to is not very clear or acceptable, really written out. That's why we need to write another book about this, right? What is the new framework that we want to propose, that I want to propose of how to look at this? If the framework is right, everything falls into place. And so lack of that framework or understanding of that framework, and then not learning how to be a critical thinker takes time. I think those are the things that we need to focus on, rather than saying they're critical thinkers, but they don't accept Adamic, the evolution. And to me, it's a journey, right? It's a journey of discovery that we have to walk the walk, but also we also need to be critical. That as scientists, we are always critical. So yes, this is the best, and I always tell my students, the way evolution explains, it's the best explanation we have today to explain biodiversity and the diversity of organisms. Is this the last one? That would be wrong for me as a scientist to say that, right? And so saying, let's explore. So if you have a problem, if things don't seem to fit, right, go become a scientist, right? Don't just sit at a desk and complain and be critical, right? The correct, since you're critiquing science, you have to become a scientist. So roll up those sleeves, go become a scientist in the lab and do those experiments. And maybe you'll come up with a better explanation than natural selection. And that's fine. We'll all learn together. So that's my answer to that, because it's easy to point. It's easy to complain, but when you tell them to go do the work, then that's the real test. And I draw from Islam. Islam says, don't just speak and talk, go do the work. And there are many verses that say, when Abraham asked God in one of the verses in the chapter of the cow, show me how you bring the dead back to life. God didn't say you can't ask the question. He didn't say, oh, let's philosophize about it. He said, go bring a bird, cut it up. So evidence, research, experimentation, using our mind and our observations to come up with the right, with conclusions that may change with time.
Stefano, you have additional comments?
Yes, if I may interject, if I may follow up on Rana's contribution. Speaking as an educator, I find myself in full agreement with her. I teach courses both in history of ideas, under the general template of history of ideas or philosophical thought, that actually deal with Islam and science. And the fact that developing critical thinking, regardless of the specific ideas that we're talking about, Adamic exceptionalism can be one, but there are 1,000 topics. It takes, like evolution, takes time. And that is what makes this enterprise, this revolution, exciting, but also very frustrating, because as an educator, you only deal with the students, 3-4 months. We call it a semester, but in fact, it's only a few months, and you get all the friction, but you don't see the change. The change will probably come, in the very long run. Something that keeps me going is the hope that, despite all the friction and the debates in class that sometimes show a certain amount of ability, well, at some point I will receive an email, maybe in 20 years, if I'll still be alive, from someone saying, hey, you know what? Actually, what you were teaching me 20 years ago did open up a new world for me. Thank you for that. But again, maybe this is a form of faith, but I'll stop here, and perhaps Nidhal has something to say about this as well.
Or maybe I should refer also to the second question by Basma Diab, who relates to the title of the booklet, Islam and Science, Past, Present, and Future Debates. Why did you pick the word debates and not dialogue or other alternative terms?
Maybe I can take this one, and of course Nidhal can correct me. Perhaps this question was inspired by what I pointed out earlier, which is the fact that Nidhal and I have only partially overlapping profiles, backgrounds. Because to be sure, the introduction to the topics is an opinionated one, but this booklet is not about us. It's about the discussions out there. So rather than a dialogue between me and Nidhal, and to be sure there are dialogues, there are discussions between us, this is about the debates that we are reconstructing. We are, of course, adding our evaluation, our assessment, but this is about the debates out there. It's not about Nidhal and me. Nidhal?
Yeah, and because the word debate really reflects the fact that, the word debate very often comes with the adjective heated debate, right? And debates tend to be heated Not always, but quite often. Suppose we had called this, past, present, and future conversations. And people say, oh, okay, interesting. Good for you to be having this kind of conversation. Or if we had said, dialogue or chat or something, it wouldn't reflect really the nature of the discussions out there, because the discussions out there are really heated. I mean, people call each other heretics over views that they hold on Islam and science and things like that. So I think the word debate is the minimum we could have used to reflect the state of the discussions out there.
Okay, so there's something at stake. It's important, but it's also explorative, I understand. So it's also not always reaching a conclusion and allowing for multiple voices. There's a third question that's by Nathan Mech regarding challenges to what it means to be human. So that's an issue that has come up. Should human be defined narrowly as Homo sapiens or by the presence of characteristics like intelligence? Will any books in the series tackle the theological ethical implications of issues like cloning or the possibility that we might someday create a new species that's not Homo sapiens? So that we are modifying humans and moving even beyond the threshold. Will that be a topic?
So the exploration of what genetic engineering is doing and will be doing in the near and farther future is definitely on the agenda of the upcoming books or booklets in the series, and then how that relates to theology, jurisprudence, and so on, and even culture, more widely, Muslim culture, history, and so on. Now, I think the nature of humanity, nature of human, what do we mean by human? I think this relates directly to the question of evolution. So suppose we asked the same question 10,000 years ago. Would we give the same answer as to, so who's a human? Neanderthals and other human species, right? So we say, well, there are some commonalities, but there are some subspecies, and humans can be this and that. And it definitely looks like tomorrow there's going to be a similar spread, maybe branching out of humans. Some of them will go and live on Mars and never return for all kinds of reasons. And some of them maybe will get onto spacecrafts that will travel through the solar system and leave and then no longer be tied to Earth. I'm talking about a few centuries from now. Some of them will have evolved here just by nature that history evolves. And so we will have evolved. So a few hundred years from now, we will not be the same as who we are now and talking. So I think this question of what does it mean to be human, I think is the absolute central question to religion in general, to culture, to science, to philosophy, theology, and so on. And I don't think there is any rigid answer to it. I think it's an evolving, fluid answer, as far as I can see.
Thank you very much. Rana, you want to come in?
Yeah, I want to comment just to follow up on what Nidhal said. Definitely, the framework of how we have observed nature in the past, in modernity, in the past 300 years, has been a framework of a very particular framework of Judeo-Christian capitalistic kind of view, with the human in the center as an individual. And what we're realizing as biologists today, that we cannot put, even as we define species, that there's no clear-cut lines between species. So even the siloing of science is wrong, right? Chemistry, physics, math, biology. We see that they overflow when we really dig deep. And the more we know that they're related. And if we look at biology and biodiversity, there's no like this is one species and it's cut off from the other species, that they all flow into each other. There's a spectrum. And this reflects or pushes us to change how we perceive the world. Again, I go back to this new framework that we have to come up with and how we look at the world and hence explain it or interpret it to make sense within our virtue, ethics, and how we look at the world. So these are related. When I look at the world as siloed, the whole framework of my philosophy and ethics is different. When I look at it as a spectrum and continuum, then the whole ethics also changes in the framework. So I think this is what we have to grapple with so that we can now look at nature in a whole new way, not just uncovering things that we didn't realize in the past, but helping us understand how to grapple. And so Homo sapiens, it's not just Homo sapiens. We know it's a continuum. We know we have Neanderthals DNA in us. As we change, what does it mean? What is normal, right? There's nothing normal. The brain and consciousness was mentioned earlier. We don't even understand how the brain functions yet, right? So I think it needs a lot more push of doing more science so that we can start understanding these very complicated, complex organs, such as our brain, where it fits in the grand scheme of things. By the way, we're not the smartest, right? There are smarter organisms at the same level of development. However, we are better at other things, and not better, we are more fit in other things. We are social creatures, and we're good at being social, right? I'm sure people have heard about the domesticated Homo sapiens. And so we're discovering a whole new world out there because we are shifting how we look at the world. And it's like, you don't know what you don't know, right? But, and that's so promising to discover new ways of seeing things. And I need to just also underline, there's a lot of science fiction out there, and people get excited, especially the general public, about all these advances and technology and robots and ChatGPT. But by the way, as much as it advances, it will advance in certain areas to be better than the human being, maybe in calculations, analyzing huge amounts of data. But ultimately, we, the humans, are creating these data, the data sets that are fed to these to the software. But we don't even understand our own biology, our own brains. Hence, imagine how much is still there, right? So things are going to change and shift, and it's exciting, and we need the framework to help guide us, but it won't be the end of the world, and that's what makes us wake up every morning.
So we may come to see ourselves differently over time and our world. Maybe turning to the book series again, Stefano, you're planning multiple volumes. What do you hope to achieve in a couple of years from now?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this question. They say it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future, but Nidhal and I have a clear and ambitious plan, I'd say. We intend to cover precisely those topics that are briefly touched upon in the second half of our booklet. We are trying to recruit the best authors, the most competent, cutting-edge authors in the respective sub-branches, sub-areas of this multifaceted debate. So we'll have, for instance, booklets about Islam and artificial intelligence, cosmology, environmental ethics, laws and medicine, evolution, exobiology, female scientists in Islam, Islam and psychology. So we will be either shedding light on some historical topics that have been insufficiently investigated, or we will be pushing the debate when it comes to these new and hot topics. And we will try to unpack the topics as much as possible, and also to represent diversity of views. So that's, again, each and every booklet will do, as far as a specific subtopic is concerned, exactly what Nidhal and I did with the debates out there in the first booklet. So an overview, but also, the most up-to-date knowledge and the critical view at that.
So there's a variety of topics, scientific topics or related to science, but is there also diversity within the Muslim world? Are you allowing the most orthodox and the most atheistic voices in the series?
Just to confirm what I just said, we include one booklet that is critical towards the very idea of harmonizing religion, Islam and science. So.
Yes,
it's in the making, so I cannot say too much, but just to confirm this approach, following up on that.
Yeah, so just to add, there will definitely be a wide spectrum of positions and views, including from non-Muslims, Muslims who are not typically religious or non-religious at all, Muslims who are conservative, to use sort of a simplified label, Muslims who we would typically refer to as reformers or modernists or something. Some of them are scientists, some of them are philosophers sort of by training. So we have a whole variety. I think the challenge will be with our public to not to try to read too much into the map. It's like, oh, you see, they picked this author, oh, they picked that author. We're not picking authors because of their personal views and positions. We're picking authors for their academic scholarship and expertise. And they have the latitude to, first of all, we ask them to try to do an overview so that it is useful to the general readers, the students, and so on. But at the same time, feel free to present your views. And we hope that in the aggregate, within 3, 4, 5 years, once we have had 10, 20 titles, people will look at the whole thing and will say, oh, it's very rich and diverse.
Okay, maybe a follow-up question. But are all those authors taking science seriously? I mean, they may differ in their philosophy of science, but I do think that you have a kind of shared idea that those who say, well, science is just, well, it's human, but who downplay science too much, that's not part of the agenda of this series, that it's respecting science to some extent.
Yes, you are absolutely right. So we are open-minded enough for people to have some criticism of philosophy of science, let's say. Is it, critical realism or whatever views of how science should be understood and should function, but not people who reject science just because, again, we referred earlier to dogmas or personal philosophies or, sacred this or that. There's all kinds of schools that, claim sacred science and it's completely mystical and stuff like that. So we take it as, a necessary premise that what used to be referred to in the old centuries as established knowledge, and nowadays we have enough established knowledge through science that has been repeated and proven through multiple measurements and experiments around the world and in different contexts that, so if somebody comes and says, look, I'm going to write a book to defend geocentrism because I'm just not convinced that planets go around the sun, then we say, no, thank you. And they say, see, you are dogmatic. You really want to defend this Western science that says the sun has to be at the center and the earth has to be a planet and revolve around it. And we say, we are not defending any Western science. We are defending established science. So we have enough evidence and this debate has been closed. So geocentrism is dead and we are not going to give it any platform. So that kind of approach.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe turn to Professor Dajani again. Do you have additional insights, comments, questions for the authors?
Yeah, maybe one last comment. I think the importance of the general public and different experts in different disciplines to read about this and to learn about it, especially those coming from religious scholars and theologians. From my experience, one of the challenges is the lack of understanding of the science, of the biology. There are not enough books written, and since we're talking about the Islamic world, not enough books written in Arabic about science to help give them a 101 of what is evolution, what is genetics, what is a gene, etc. And I don't know. I mean, that's why these books are important. And maybe in the future, my question is, would they be translated into Arabic or other languages? I think it was alluded to in the beginning. I think it's very important because once you explain the science and they understand what it is, suddenly the whole challenge, whatever debate, dilemma, whatever, disappears. And there have been efforts, and it's coming to educate people from religious scholars about science. But I think we need more of that. And that leads me to when we have controversial issues, is that it's not about Rana, the scientist, making a decision. Is this compatible with Islam? And it's not the scholar to go take that decision. It's about us sitting together and saying, okay, hey, I'll explain all the science. You tell me what's your problem with the religion. Let's have a conversation. And we'll find that we're both on the same page and that we can find a resolution where science keeps going and there's no ethical dilemma in religion. But the thing is, it's about communication and dialogue. And that's why these books are very important and we need more of them. Okay,
thank you very much. I see one more question, maybe by Adnan, who says, well, when writing about Islamic science, must one be well versed in the Arabic language to understand Islam? So not only understanding science, but understanding Islam. How much is that requiring a particular linguistic skill? How much is it focused? I don't know. Stefano or Nidhal?
Well, I mean,
Nidhal, perhaps?
if we require people to know Arabic in order to understand Islam, then we're ruling out 80% of the Muslim world, right? So that just defeats the whole universality of Islam. Now, I think there have been enough books written in all kinds of languages and enough scholarship written in all kinds of languages for people to really come to a deep understanding. I have learned quite a lot about Islam from non-Muslims having written in non-Arabic languages than I have learned in my own native Arabic language. And there is no shame in this. There is absolutely no shame. I mean, as the Islamic saying goes, you know, wisdom is the goal of the believer, wherever it may be, he or she is entitled to it. And so I'm entitled to wisdom from wherever it may be, it may come, and in any other language. Now, those who specialize in, let's say, exegesis of the Quran or the knowledge of the hadith and all the sciences that come around in the Islamic corpus have to learn Arabic for sure. I mean, they have to dig deep into the corpus in Arabic, but we are not talking about people who are going, we are not here to do a novel commentary on the Quran. This is not our purpose. Our purpose is, as several of the panelists have said, Stefano and Rana, is to find a framework, is to find a way to relate these two big fields called science in general and Islam in general. How do they relate in a way that is neither conflictual nor schizophrenic? Because that's the only way to go forward. Now, I don't think there is an absolute need for deep Arabic knowledge to be able to construct something like that. Although Arabic is a wonderful language, and people who master Arabic, wonderful. My late mother, if I can just call on her spirit right now, was always after me for making, you know, grammatical mistakes when I make a statement in classical Arabic, and that forced me to try to always watch myself and, you know, do my Arabic properly. But you know, one has to be reasonable and realistic.
Yeah, and you have to rely on others as well to contribute from their scholarly background. Maybe a last question I see from Sabra Weber, whether you also consider not only the kind of theoretical side of science, but also the aesthetics or affective dimensions of science and religion. Sometimes it's too hard-edged, she writes, be in consideration with religion. So the beauty, the affective dimension of science and religion, is that also considered for the series?
I'll just say one thing, and then maybe Stefano can add. It's interesting that I was just contacted a couple of weeks ago to write a short article on Islam, science, and beauty or aesthetics. And I haven't started writing, but I will tell you what my idea immediately, like, how do I approach this? And I thought, yeah, so it's short enough because I was asked for only 1,000 words. And I said, yeah, I can do that. But it's challenging enough because how do you relate Islam, science, and beauty or aesthetics? And I thought, my favored concept or idea of awe at the cosmos, awe at nature, creation, humans, human nature, human psyche, brain, consciousness. And I thought, I think I'll approach it from that angle. Awe is the sort of perfect relation between science, religion, and beauty. And so that's the way I will do it. Now, to be honest, we haven't thought of that angle for the series. I don't know if Stefano in his own apartment has been thinking along those lines. I haven't, but yeah, why not? Maybe for the future.
Okay.
Well, perhaps not directly in relation to the series, but beauty is definitely one of the concepts that are constantly in the back of my mind while I'm engaging in these conversations with my students. And I would say that this new framework, especially the one that one acquires by studying evolution, goes with a certain beauty. But I'm sure that, well, in this, in fact, I'm influenced by Rana, so perhaps she can add to that. Rana, on to you.
No, I mean, I know we don't have time, but it is what you said, Nidhal. It's the awe. It's the beauty that it's when you look at a beautiful work of art, whether it's a sculpture or a painting or something in nature, and you're filled with this exhilaration, this awe, your hormones, it's the same feeling with science and religion, that compatibility that we want to try to bring to the forth and say, this is part of religion. This is, in Islam, we call this ibadah. Ibadah means worship. It's like you get this thrill when you're worshiping, this serenity, yet this beautiful feeling. That's what's being described. And that's what like you said, that's what we try to convey to our students, and that's what we feel internally ourselves. And this is the epitome of being human, to feel those feelings and to revel in nature all around us.
Okay, yes, I think I fully agree, and I think it's important to convey that seeking understanding, like scientific understanding, doesn't diminish, doesn't take away from appreciation, from awe, from being impressed by the reality we live in. I think it's time for us to come to a conclusion. Thank you all. Thank the participants who just viewed this discussion or who will view it later for their interest in the topic, and the editors and authors for writing this book and setting up this series. Looking forward to seeing future issues as well. Nidhal, in your physical setting, you're now going for reception?
Yes, thank you so much for that. That has been the fastest hour of my day. I don't know where that went to. That says the discussion was fantastic. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to Dr. Nidhal. Thank you to Dr. Stefano and your cat, who we can see on the screen, is adorable. And also to Professor Rana and Dr. Wim, we really thank you for your time today. We didn't get a chance to ask the audience if they have any questions here on site, but perhaps we can chat when we head over to the library, inside the library, for some refreshments in a few minutes. So thank you. Could I ask everyone to just give a short round of applause? Clap for, thank you today. And a shout out to Paul in Al-Akhawayn. A lot of our team will see you soon. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was good?
Thank you, yes.
Good. Wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know how many this is. 27 or something. Oh, sorry? 33. 33. Wow. That's fantastic. Yeah. It's good.
Thank you, Nidhal. See you